Joining me today to talk about dairy is the wonderful Shalani McCray. She's a fantastic food educator, health educator, I should say, and she's going to share a lot more about herself in a minute. Hi, Shalani, how are you?
Hi, Alex.
Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful discussion, because I think dairy is probably one of the most confusing from both a health and ethics perspective out there that you could come across, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
It can be, but it is, yeah.
Exactly. Out there to everybody, and you're going to help us dispel a bit of that confusion. Can you just share a little bit about your journey, why you chose nursing first, naturopathy, and just kind of how you fell into this space?
Okay, it even started before nursing. I've always been interested in natural health and in herbal remedies, and I'm a Taurus, so I've got this connection with the earth. And I'm from a very medical family. My father's a doctor, my mother was a nurse educator. And so I guess I was considered a little bit quirky, but they were always respectful of, the latest sort of thing, philosophy or whatever I was bringing into the house as a teenager. And they were a little bit curious too. And it was interesting because when I was thinking about it, I thought, gee, when we were little, my sisters and I, often, instead of going straight for a Panadol or whatever, Mum and Dad would often give us a traditional remedy first of their Asian backgrounds, the diverse ones, and did it with the grandchildren as well. So, I don't know, there was sort of a bit of a seed planted, I guess. But I actually started off, my first profession was in early childhood education as a preschool teacher. And then from then on, I went to do nursing, and that was when it was a degree course in the universities. And then a couple of years after my youngest son, who's now started school, he's now 21, a couple of years after he started school, I decided to start studying naturopathy. I did it one advanced diploma at a time, and I just did it out of interest because it was something I was interested in. I had the time and the wherewithal, and from then, it took on a life of its own. I had a new profession. I had a clinic or like a private practice at home, I guess. And within the first year, I had a waiting list. That was more by good luck, I think, and a number of other factors. But, yeah, so it just sort of took on from there. And so since then, I've been trained by Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride as a GAPS practitioner. I've done some of the Mind Foundation trainings in MAPS and a long time ago in Dan. And then a few years after I started practicing, I noticed a bit of a connection, or quite a strong connection, between the working of the mind and like mental health and emotional status and what people were presenting with. So I went on to do laughter yoga training. I studied EFT, emotional freedom technique. And then I started studying different religions because I got into meditation and different spiritualities, and also the way our mind, our spirituality has an impact on our physical health. And next thing, after doing this study in religions and things, I found myself ordained as interfaith minister.
Wow.
And now I'm pursuing studies in medicine if I don't get committed for lunacy before then.
You're an eternal learner. It's fabulous.
Which is so far removed from me growing up, and it's all like parents come and go, "Who are you?" Like,
well, I think I'm the same. I really rejected being told what I had to learn at school, and I really started to love learning when I got to decide what I wanted to learn.
That's the difference.
Yeah, it is, and I think a lot of us are like that.
I wonder, considering that we went to the same school.
I know, actually. That's so
apart, mind you. You're like a baby. I think that instilled something in us.
Yeah, a love of learning, even if we might not have loved
on our own terms.
Yeah, exactly. Love of learning on your own terms. Eternal curiosity. It's a good thing. So we could talk about all of that for hours, but here we're here to talk about dairy, obviously. Oh. So, obviously there was the dawning of agriculture. Why do you think we started drinking other animals' milk? Can you run us through that from a traditional diet's perspective?
Well, it's funny. I mean, why did we start drinking? I mean, the mind boggles as to, someone walks past this animal, has these dangly things, and they think to pull on them and this liquid comes out. And then they go, oh, I'm going to drink that. And then it's considered this really nutritious food.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. One of the things I often talk about is that generations before us seem to instinctively know what was right and wrong to eat. They didn't have all the science and technology that we have now, and I guess they maybe they didn't overthink things as much as we do. And so I mean, obviously there was an element of trial and error in, a few of them ate some berries and they all died and they went, oh, we don't eat those berries, and they passed that information down. But for some reason they came across milk, or these animals that produce this milk, and found it to be a really, what they considered, or most cultures I think who came across it, found it to be a nutritious food.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And a lot of the people that are against dairy, let's say that it's for baby cows or for babies in general, and you reach a certain stage and you move on to eating other things. Why do you think we continue to drink milk in this day and age?
All right. Well,
I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I'm going to preface my answer
with
2 points, I think. Mm-hmm. One is, look, you can find a study to back up anything.
Yeah.
All right. So there's evidence for both sides of almost every argument, I believe. And secondly, I'll get a bit woo-woo, but I think that one of my teachers, Byron Katie, I don't know if you've heard of her, says defence is the first act of war. And we tend to go in this whole defence thing when something that we believe in is being questioned, I guess. And then one of my mantras is from the Course in Miracles, which says, in my defencelessness, my safety lies. Mm-hmm. So I tend to not, I don't know, I know what I believe is right, and I think, and I'm happy to share what I think sits well with me. But I think everyone just needs to do what sits well with them. Absolutely. So with dairies for baby cows, says who? Right? Who said that? And then we have the other chestnut of, we're the only species that drinks the milk of another species. So are we? Could it be that we're the only species that has developed a thinking process that allowed us to think about drinking the milk of another species, and that we actually have access to it? So I know, and we sort of tend to have a lot of, do's and don'ts about things as well, that I don't know how much, exactly what it's based on. So we're told cats shouldn't drink milk. Well, our cat loves raw milk, but won't have a bar of pasteurised milk, just walks away. Now, our cat's 18. It's been to the vet twice, and that's only after it's had fights with neighbourhood cats when it had got a scratch and we thought it'd get infected. That's it. So so that cat is happy to drink the milk of another species. On top of that, I mean, on the news, we have all these beautiful feel-good stories where the orphan kitty is suckling off the puppy dog, or in a farm, and animals suckling off a pig or whatever. So I don't know that sort of we're the only species that drinks the milk of another species really washes. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, so it's almost like an evolution of the brain, and therefore it just makes sense.
Well, it does to me.
Yeah. And
many others. If it doesn't to you, I mean, you've got to do what feels right. But to me, that's how. Sorry, it's not a very academic answer. But
I don't think this issue is academic, because, as you said, we can find academia to back up anything.
Yeah.
So it's actually about empowering ourselves to think freely and independently about what sits right for us and what feels good for us, both ethically and health-wise. So speaking of health in relation to dairy, a lot of people today seem to have issues with lactose and caffeine, or both. Mm-hmm. Can you explain perhaps why this growing intolerance or allergy is happening with these two ingredients in milk?
Okay. So first of all, you have to distinguish between lactose and casein.
Yeah, of course.
So lactose is a sugar,
mm-hmm.
and it's the sugar that's in milk, and it requires an enzyme lactase to break it down so that the body can it can be absorbed by the body. So casein is a protein, and it's one of the many proteins found in milk. And so where lactose tends to be an intolerance and a lack of an enzyme for people, casein or most food allergies are to do with the protein in the food. So the protein in the seafood, the protein in the nuts or whatever it is. And so an allergy to casein and the symptoms are often far worse than a lactose intolerance. So although you can have the similar, like with lactose intolerance, you have digestive discomfort, and it can be quite extreme. With casein allergies, you can also have things like sinus problems, eczema, asthma, hives, respiratory. People say it makes them more mucousy. There's also a connection between some of the proteins or the caseins and obesity, heart disease, diabetes, those sorts of things. So casein allergies are more serious than lactose intolerances, and some of them, a very small percentage of them, can be anaphylactic too, which means that they're life-threatening. So in the case of lactase, originally it was just babies who could tolerate lactose, because lactose is in breast milk. And then at the age of weaning, which originally was around about 5, 6, 7, you lost that ability to make lactase. And so, and because mainly you weren't drinking it anymore. And then around 11,000 years ago, well, recently they've discovered that there's a phenomenon called lactase persistence. And what they think is that about 11,000 years ago, that's when herding all started, and archaeologists and things seem to have found vessels or bits of vessels that show that it was dairy products that had been fermented. Now, that's really interesting because when you ferment dairy products, you reduce the lactose content. So somehow they've come across the milk and found it intolerable straight, and they've fermented it and found it easier to digest, and have continued over the next few thousand years to continue to consume it that way. And this is in countries like the Middle East and Africa and certain parts of Europe. And then a few thousand years after that, so I think it's about 7,500 years after, they think that a mutation occurred in some of these people from those areas that allowed them to continue to make that enzyme, the lactase. So instead of it stopping at that young age, it continued on in some people. So
that would describe, that would explain a bit of that hereditary kind of either you can or you can't, and that's your lot in life kind of thing, depending on your lineage.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you'll often find people who can digest milk will, without any issues, can trace their ancestry back to these countries. And there's now talk of gluten persistence too, which is interesting because it's something I posted about yesterday, I think, where there are some people, even people who are diagnosed with celiac disease, who can eat certain properly prepared sourdough, like gluten, wheat-containing sourdoughs. So it's also good to remember, I don't know if you've heard of the food activist Robin O'Brien.
Yeah,
and she says, are we allergic to food or what's being done to it? So we now manipulate a lot of our food, and in the case of milk, we not only do we pasteurize and homogenize it, but we also take out the fat to make low-fat milk, or we add in things, nutrients, vitamins, minerals like calciums and omega-3s and whatever. And so maybe it's the manipulation of the food that is the problem for people and not the actual food in its natural state.
And so that would explain why a lot of people who think they can't drink milk for whatever reason, might be the protein, might be the sugars, then hap upon raw milk or try it because they've been told you should be okay with raw milk, and then they are quite often. Yeah.
So I've seen that quite frequently where people have said, oh, it's been years since I've had, a milkshake or whatever, and because of this digestive discomfort or whatever, and they've had raw milk and they're just, oh, wow, I'm fine. So, or it's fermented. So those people will tend to be the people also who do okay. They can't drink milk, but they can have yogurt or cheese because that's been, or kefir because it's been fermented.
Yeah. Okay. And you talk about hereditary scenarios, but what if it was allergy or intolerance? Is there any hope for reversal? I mean, you're a GAPS practitioner. You've probably seen
Yeah.
pretty interesting stuff in that space. Can you talk to
Sure.
us about what an exciting scenario might be for someone who thinks, I just want to drink milk again, or give my kid a piece of cheese at a party and not worry, you know?
Yeah. Well, for a start, you want to know, is your problem the lactose or the casein?
Yeah.
So if your problem's the lactose, and you choose, and you're comfortable with, and you can get unpasteurized milk, then give it a go and see how you go. You also, one of the things too, where even if you find yogurt is a problem, you might find, so where GAPS is concerned, in the GAPS diet, the yogurt that you have, so you normally have to make it yourself because it needs to be fermented for 24 hours. And that allows the lactose, the sugar, to be broken right down. Now, it means you get a much more sour product.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is the yogurt in the shops is only fermented or cultured for a few hours for convenience and whatever, and also palatability. They probably want to keep some of that sugar in there, and then they go and add more. So, you might want to try making your own yogurt too if you want yogurt and you're not tolerating shop-bought yogurt, and seeing how that goes. So that's where the lactose hits it. So if you're going to have or the other thing is you can take lactase tablets.
Okay.
Which some people choose to do. I was at a party recently where someone was indulging and she said, I'm just going to take a tablet. And she's a nurse and she's quite fine with that.
Yeah.
She's own. Now, if a casein is your problem, then you might want to give A2 milk a go. And A2 milk is more widely available now. It is pasteurised, and I'm pretty sure it's homogenised as well. I've had personal experience with A2. My son, again, he's been like my greatest teacher with all of this. He, as I said, he's now 21, but I think A2 milk, it was when it first came in, so it had been about a decade ago. We started him on, he was so sick as a baby. He had loads of respiratory infections, constantly raced to hospital with things like bronchiolitis, ear infections and things like that. And once we started him on the A2 milk, they literally vanished. It was like amazing. And so we just continued him on that. But interestingly enough, a few years after we started it, he started high school. And, they've got a bit more freedom in what they're going to, they're purchasing their own things at the corner shop and stuff.
Their oak strawberry tartan. And,
right. So
he
iced coffees and the chocolate milks.
Yeah.
And he himself noticed how horrible he felt. And so he gave them up. Thank goodness. So, so he could really see a difference. And interestingly enough, he does better on A2 milk than he does on raw milk.
Wow, okay.
So, again, I keep saying there's no one size fits all, and you just got to do what's right for you and just do a bit of trial and error and see, and that's what we found with him. So, yeah.
Now, we don't technically really need milk at all. So what if someone cannot and won't have either, let's say either vegan by choice or horrific allergy? What goodness in milk is something that we can easily find in just 2 or 3 foods off the top of your head somewhere else?
All right, so it's a difference between whether you're going to say milk or whether you're going to say dairy, because a lot of the goodness that you can find in milk you can get in butter as well, like good quality butter and fermented like yogurts and kefirs and things like that too.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Here we go again with, we don't necessarily have to have dairy, like for the goodness. Well, there are some people I know of who have turned their health around by consuming good quality unpasteurised dairy. They've turned around dental problems, things to do with their lots of holes and dental caries and things like that. So, again, you don't know until you try. Now, if it's an ethical reason or your choice and whatever, that's your business. And really, all I say to people is eat a broad spectrum of everything. So if you're not eating dairy and you're eating a broad spectrum of other foods, then the only one, and I'm not going to get into the whole thing of it, but the only one is meat, where there are certain nutrients in it that you just cannot get. I mean, doctors who are vegans and whatever will tell you have to take a supplement, and I don't believe we were created to take a supplement. I'll end it there.
Yeah. Yep. Great. So raw milk is probably about the most contentious thing going both in the US and here to a lesser extent. I was quite sad to go to the place where I would normally buy my raw cream to make butter the other day, and because of what happened to that poor little dude and the way the media, rather, treated that case, they had decided to on the side of caution and not stock raw dairy even secretly in their little back fridge anymore. So I'm personally offended by removing choice. I think that's really the wrong way to go, especially when statistically a raw cucumber is more dangerous than raw milk has ever been.
Yeah.
What do you advise people? I mean, at the end of the day, we are so ingrained with the way media plays in our hearts and on our hearts. And I'd say a lot of people who perhaps were quite enthusiastic about raw dairy might have seen some of the scare tactics that people use to make us terrified of raw milk and to demonise raw milk farmers. Can you sort of share anything to keep us confident and to keep us independently analysing the situation, and maybe even share a little bit of how big dairy industry works and what's in it loss-wise for them if we are given choice? Is that too big a question? That's pretty monstrous.
Not so much that it's too big a question, but I guess it insinuates that there's some sort of conspiracy thing or what's going on.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have my suspicions, and I'm sure many of us do, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Okay? So, look, I just urge people to use common sense. Generations before us, generations before us, as we've now seen, like, so much so that we had a genetic mutation 7,500 years ago, have drunk it and enjoyed it and seen it as, like many traditional medicines like Ayurveda, see milk as such a nutritious food that they give it to people when they're convalescing and when they're ailing, and they put butter in it or ghee in it as well, so I think that it's something that, again, it comes down to a personal choice thing. Yeah, those as you
inopportune. Sorry, yeah.
Tug on our heartstrings and whatever with their studies, and then I can find you studies that say the opposite. So I can't give you anything conclusive there. I mean, it's conclusive for me.
Yeah.
I've done the work and that's what feels right for me. Yeah. But again, I just go back to the common sense when we didn't have the science and technology, where people drank it. And, my dad's 85, and when we started drinking raw milk again, he first tasted it and he said he literally felt like he was transported back to when he was a child.
Oh,
and I can't tell you how many people we used to sometimes at the seminars and whatever have little tastings of raw milk. And I can't tell you how many people from round about the mid-60s age onwards would just go, oh, my God, this is how I remember milk tasting. So if you're comfortable with it and you can get it, I'm really fortunate that where I get it from, our local health food, they haven't even noticed a hiccup. If anything, they've noticed an increase in demand. I don't know if that has anything to do with me, because it's
publicity is good publicity at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. And having said that, I did get a couple of quite a few private inbox messages and emails and things saying, gosh, I just started drinking. I just convinced my husband it was okay to drink and give the children, and then this has happened. Now what am I going to do? And I'm like, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're comfortable with it before, we don't know the full story with that. If you're not comfortable with it now, don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't force anyone to do anything, and,
I think I might just also clarify, there's raw milk and raw milk, and by that I mean there is factory feedlot, poor squishy cows living in the pens in which they're milked. That is raw milk that I would absolutely never drink myself either.
So I eat to raw milk dairy, and I would eat my food off the floor.
Yeah, exactly.
So and it's, I guess it's one of the reasons why they do want to pasteurise milk, and I would want it pasteurised too, looking at some dairies and how they're not really my idea of clean. So yeah, you really must, and raw or unpasteurised milk that currently is available, and obviously we're in New South Wales, and unfortunately Victoria is going through a shocking time at the moment because they want to put this additive in to make it immediately taste bad, so that it'll really deter people from drinking it, and God forbid that spreads throughout Australia. But you really do have to, with any of your food, you have to, I believe, your meat, anything, you have to make a distinction with the way that it's traditionally raised.
Absolutely. And it's really about making that commitment to knowing where your food comes from. Call
Sure.
them, visit
Yeah.
them, pop the
yeah.
kids in the car and go for a day trip and
Yeah.
And really see where it's coming from.
So the children can see their food comes from a farm and not from a shop. And
it's special stuff.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're a big fan of the old vitamin K2. Can you just expand a little bit on why this is such an essential nutrient, and then just talk a little bit about that and other benefits of butter and ghee specifically?
Yeah. Okay, so again, you want to be making a distinction between the source of the cream that the butter is made from. So if you're making your own, like you were saying, or myself, then we're using a really good quality cream or more cream if we can get it. If you're buying it butter commercially, I tend to like to look on the label that the cream is coming from New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is we don't have any butter in Australia that's labelled grass-fed, but on the whole, so far, most cows in New Zealand seem to be grass-fed. Yeah. So you have a better chance of the butter, the cream being a grass-fed, so the animal has been fed grain, or if it has, it might be a minimal amount. I don't know. But in New Zealand, it seems to be that it's 100% grass-fed. Fortunately, the brand of butter I get is from the supermarket. It's $1.90 or something. It's West Gold. I've got one here.
Yeah, I get West Gold as well. It's fabulous. Yeah. Without the salt, so that you avoid the fake salt.
Yeah. Yep. And it's all out of the... So I buy so much of this stuff that I freeze it. So that's out of the freezer over there because it's dripping now. So if you make sure that the cream is from New Zealand, I think that you've got a better bet that it's been grass-fed. So with the benefits, well, it's pretty much how long have you got? And it's not just the benefits because of the K2. So the K2 is, a few years ago I wrote on my Facebook page that vitamin K2 is going to be the new vitamin D. And so when vitamin D became a big deal, it was pretty much that it was useful for so much of the functioning of our body to have optimal functioning. And K2 looks like it's quite similar to that. I can rattle off all the different things with your immune system and with heart health and with a circulatory system and for skin and brain health and all of that. But all in all, it just Dr. Weston A. Price from the Weston A. Price Foundation, or he founded it, he discovered when he studied traditional people hundreds of years ago that, not hundreds of years ago, 1920s, that there was what he called the X factor. And he found that this X factor, he felt, contributed or was a big contributor to the overall fantastic health of a lot of the traditional people that he came across. And we now know that X factor was vitamin K2. So butter contains vitamin K2, but interestingly, it contains a lot of nutrients that are like cardioprotective. And yet most of the people involved in heart health will tell you don't eat butter for heart health. But, one of the nutrients it contains is vitamin A. Yeah. And vitamin A is very cardioprotective, and it's also great for your thyroid. We're seeing a lot of people with thyroid and adrenal issues, and vitamin A is really great for them. Butter is a great source of antioxidants, which are required to prevent free radical damage, and of course that's important for heart health. It's butter's got a great source of selenium. Now, selenium is also an antioxidant, but it's a great toxic metal chelator, and it's also vital for thyroid health. Yeah. Butter's a great source of cholesterol. Now, depending on what side of that argument you are, if you are for understanding that cholesterol is good for us, that occurs naturally in food, then you're going to see that it's consuming butter and thus consuming cholesterol is going to be great for your immune system, for hormone health, for vitamin D metabolism. It's just, as I said, we sort of ended up finding out that vitamin D was useful for just so many pathways in our body to achieve optimal health. So, and also it contains CLA, conjugated linoleic acid, which is cancer protective.
Do any of those nutrients become damaged if you fry butter? Like if I'm doing an omelette, let's say, and you do a big knob of butter, is there anything that destabilises in that list that you've just given us in that context?
Well, for a start, if you're just sizzling your butter, like not on a ridiculously high heat for a long amount of time, I mean, anything's going to, even like your coconut oils, and coconut oil does get a little bit damaged anyway. You're always going to make things worse by longer heating and higher heating. But on the whole, most of those are fat-soluble vitamins and nutrients anyway, and they tend to be more stable.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned briefly A2 before, so if we just revisit that, just to clarify for anyone who might not know what that is,
right.
Can you explain why A2 might be more successful for people in terms of their health and being able to tolerate milk?
Okay, so at its most simplest, it's quite complicated. So A2 is a protein, and it's called beta-casein protein, and it makes up, I don't know, not quite half the protein in cow's milk. And so some breeds of cows produce only, or pretty much mostly more than 99% A2 beta-casein. Other breeds of cows produce milk that has a variety of A2 and another protein called A1 beta-casein. And A1 digests differently than A2, and it's due to like sequencing of the amino acids on the peptide. So the formation of a protein is peptide with amino acids. So I don't want to get too complicated. So originally all dairy cows produced milk that only had the A2 protein, the beta-casein protein, but again, a mutation occurred some time ago, and that resulted in different positioning of that amino acid. There were two amino acids of histidine, which we know is related to histamine, and proline, and that happened in A1 cows. And so basically what happens is at the point of digestion, this A1 beta-casein releases a peptide called, I won't tell you the name, it's just BCM7.
Okay.
It's probably easier.
BCM7's good. Let's stick to that.
And A2 doesn't. So, and it's significant because it's becoming more evident that the link that we have with dairy and various conditions is due to this BCM7 being at the root of the problems. And part of that, the reason for that is that BCM7 is able to cross from the digestive system into the circulatory system. So we know that that's the impetus for autoimmune diseases and things like that. So naturally, if you have any intestinal permeability or leaky gut, you're going to be more susceptible to problems with the A1 protein. And babies are born with a permeable gut, so naturally you wouldn't want to be giving a baby or a child up to about the age of 12 months an A1 containing milk or dairy product. So it probably helps explain why some people have no problem with any dairy, even if it's A1, and it might be because they have a bit better gut health. There is an enzyme, again, I'm not going to go into the name, it's DP4 or something, and it can help break down this BCM7, but again, that enzyme is produced in the cells of the gut wall, so if you don't have good gut health, maybe you're not producing much of it. Medications can prevent the production of that enzyme. Genetically, you may just not produce much of it. So that enzyme can help break it down. You need to be careful, but with the A2 milk, because since there's been more knowledge about this A2 protein, it's become a good marketing ploy.
Yeah.
So the A2 milk that is the A2 brand is strictly A2 milk, but pretty much all the other brands, they might say things like naturally contains A2 protein, and while that's true, it also contains A1.
Yeah.
And so if you're trying to do a challenge to see if that's if you do okay on A2 and not on A1, that's going to be pointless for you having those milks. So just something for people to be aware of.
Brilliant. So when we think of, say, the Paleo purist diet that says optimal health is only achieved by the removal of dairy, it seems to me the things that you've just talked about, I mean, there are quite a few factors into play why it might be that some people feel so fantastic when they do remove all dairy. It's not got to do with the fact that dairy is bad for everyone full stop. It's more that the lineage might be in a factor. It might be gut permeability. It might be that you just don't produce that enzyme. Lots of different reasons. But if you do produce that great enzyme, if you do have great gut health, and if your lineage happens to say that 7,500 years ago your ancestors started making lactase again, then dairy, it seems, can actually be a wonderful thing to include for optimal health. Am I right in saying that?
You're right in saying that.
Okay, great. Because I really think what we need to achieve is independent thought and exploration of the self.
Absolutely. Look, on the grounds that and there does seem to be many variations on paleo, but I guess one of the consistent things is that don't eat dairy.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you do have an issue with casein or one of the people from the heritage that doesn't have the lactase persistence, and consuming it makes you feel bad, then why would you? Paleo people say that nuts are the bomb, nutrient dense and so healthy, yet and being in the vicinity of nut can kill my 14-year-old niece. So no one's talking about banning it or completely taking them out of your diet. And paleo people talk about seafood being fantastic and nutrient dense, and yet my son-in-law gets really very, very ill eating seafood. So should we all not eat seafood as well? It's such an individual thing. As I said yesterday, I posted on sourdough, and that even people who've been diagnosed with celiac disease can tolerate a properly made sourdough. So I think we really have to stop the broad brush approach.
Yeah.
And I know it's really convenient for people to be told, oh, just eat this and don't eat this, and that's in the story. Now, if that suits you, be it paleo, vegan, whatever it is, and you feel great, you sleep well, you have heaps of energy, your moods are balanced and all of that sort of thing, well then, fantastic. Continue doing it, you know. But, I mean, even twins have, identical twins have foods that one can tolerate better than the other. So it really becomes journeying with yourself, I think, and just seeing what suits you. And I'm afraid there's no catchy label for it, so it's not very marketable. Yeah. But, I just say eat the Shalani way, eat the Alexx way, your son would eat the Sebastian way, my neighbour would eat the Lynn way.
Yeah.
And that's just my approach to eating in an optimal way.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that's if we achieve that by the end of this course, I will be a happy person. And no more broad brushes. I can't handle the broad brush. And you won't need
people like me anymore. I can't believe that, even as a child, like I'm about to turn 50, and I can't believe when I was young, I don't think nutritionist and personal training was even a profession.
No. So, I remember the first time I went to see a naturopath. That's going on maybe 12, 13 years ago now, and it was very hippie, woo-woo, underground. I've got the name of a guy who knows a girl, like, here's the number, leave a message and she'll call you back. It's like, wow, a lot has changed. So I think it's exciting because a lot of people are in the dark and really starting to need some answers. And if the answer becomes actually you need to think for yourself instead of thinking through a marketing campaign or a broad brush diet, then that's actually, to me, the best answer there is, And I think people have to also remember that quite often you'll find a way of eating that's optimal for you for a period of time. But remembering that we're dynamic beings.
Yeah. Things change, so much affects us, be it our hormones or the environment or, life events and things like that, you might think, wow, I used to tolerate this really well and now it's not sitting really well. And you just have to go with that and work with that and realise that maybe things are changing for you now. Maybe it's changing for some sort of a reason, or it could, just because you'll get your body is not tolerating it. Find out why your body's not tolerating it. Like, is it because maybe you have some intestinal permeability now, or is it because your hormones are out of whack, or, you know, it can be maybe the stress that you're under, because we know stress affects the way our body works, not just our gut, but various chemicals that are released that affect the way our body works. So we have to stay alert on that too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time.
My
I feel
pleasure.
like each question could have been a half-hour exploration in
You did
itself.
very well in keeping me concise for me. That's
and we'll see you in the private group to answer any questions anyone has today. Yeah, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
always a pleasure, Alex.
Okay, bye.